Bueno, pues bienvenidos a todos de nuevo a la claqueta de Marco. Y hoy os traigo, que me apetecía hace ya tiempo, el making of, el cómo se hizo de V de Vendetta, ¿no? La película que está basada en el famosísimo cómic. Y bueno, la verdad es que es una película que a mí me gusta mucho, no tanto por la trama y por las actuaciones, sino por cómo está hecha. Es una película muy artesanal, los efectos especiales son todos hechos con maquetas, no hay pocas cosas con pantallas verdes y cosas así, ¿no? Con lo cual es una película que costó muchísimo hacerla y os quería, bueno, traer hoy un poco el making of para que vieseis cómo se ha hecho y que han utilizado, ¿no? La explosión, por ejemplo, del Parlamento, como lo hicieron, ¿no? Porque eso volaron una estructura de verdad y cosas así, ¿no? Así que bueno, eso espero que os guste. Y nada, deciros que estoy esperando a que salgan, a que sean los Oscars, ¿no? Para hacer un vídeo en el que diga quiénes han sido los ganadores de los principales premios de los Oscars y de los Goya, que han sido este fin de semana, el fin de semana anterior. Y bueno, la verdad es que tengo ganas de traerlo porque a mí los premios personalmente me gustan mucho y quiero que veáis un poquito quiénes han sido los ganadores por si no habéis visto alguna de las dos galas. Bueno, pues eso es todo, espero que os guste y dentro vídeo.
It was obvious from the very outset, you know, with the script and the way it was and how many sets there were, that it was going to be important to have someone who could give you great design and build great sets in a very short amount of time. The film got going really quickly. We were going to have a very short pre-production period. Owen did like an amazing job, as he did like on the Matrix films.
There's about 89 set areas that we have, or location areas that we have in the film. Some of them have 4 or 5 parts to them. It's a lot of things you've either got to find or build. And we've had a very limited amount of pre-production.
When we first started, you know, the first thing that happened was we were sort of trailing through Europe looking for a place to make the film, I guess, you know. It became apparent really quickly that we couldn't shoot in London, you know, because there wasn't enough time, not enough stage space. So we started on a tour of Europe.
Berlin just happened. We went from Budapest to Prague to Berlin, and as it turned out, the studios were suddenly available and all of their workforce were available.
All the interiors for the film are being shot here in Babelsberg Studios in Berlin. And the challenge for us really is to build, English, London sort of interiors, and we've shot a little on location in Germany, finding German locations, Berlin locations that convincingly match for London.
Well, it's been really great to be in Berlin. The studio is amazing, and obviously there's like a great film history here. And a not so great film history here, because, you know, these where a lot of Hitler's propaganda films were made as well. It's also an interesting place to make a movie like this, because they've experienced so many different oppressive regimes in this city. It's heavy with history here, so it gives so much sort of weight to what we're doing.
You could make a version of this film in England, which would be a great way of doing it, but we weren't going to make that sort of film. We were going to make more manufactured version, I guess.
You would start eventually to see. Well, you'd start, but it's quite a ways back before the fence ends.
We have gone away from certain things which were design styles, if you like, of the graphic novel, which work as a piece of art. But in this instance, I think we have tried to take a measure of London. When people look at it and say, wow, I can see this London, I can recognise it. I think James wanted a sense of earthiness that London has, a grittiness, a sense of London that is very recognisable, as London is today, or as it would have been even 20 years ago, but also a London that you feel a lot would be around in another 20 years' time, particularly in a world that's been kind of frozen by England becoming a totalitarian state.
don't really know where you are in terms of time. It's as though sort of creativity is almost stopped in a way. So a lot of the interiors, a lot of the dressing is very much today, or even slightly retro in a way. James always sort of pulled back from doing a sort of futuristic look.
We used a lot of greys and grey tones, and all the furniture kind of blended into one sort of particular tone. Plenty of things to have, but they're primarily all the same. And it just made it slightly more regimented. And then adding our sort of our Big Brother look with maybe some telegraph poles with speakers on and cameras everywhere and that sort of thing.
We've gone for very, very real kind of finishes and textures, and you know, the colours are very kind of muted. We've paid particular attention to the aging and the kind of the grain and this kind of visceral texture of the film.
Whether it was like people's homes or that, it was, you know, like the feeling of London, if you like. You know, we had a lot of English crews, so that always kept us very, you know, honest as to, you know, what was truly London or what was truly, you know, English-centric, I suppose.
It looks a lot like our world, but in their production design, Owen was able to give it a feel that was a little off. It is definitely the future of our world.
It's been a fascinating film as far as dressing is concerned, because there's been so much of it. Every set has been in its own little complex way, but obviously the biggest one has got to be the Shadow Gallery where V lives.
I remember sitting down and saying to Owen, you know, like it'd be great, you know, if in some ways this was like an expanded Ace of Clubs, if you like, and you know, there'd always be like a central piece, and then there'd be V's dressing room or V's kitchen or V's reading room. If it could all sort of spiral out from the middle.
It's a cross between a crypt and an undercroft, and I see it as it's the sort of thing that would be almost below St Paul's or underneath Westminster Cathedral or underneath the Old Bailey itself or underneath the law courts in London. It's a kind of Tudor arched space that you could almost imagine 30 years ago they bricked up a door and they forgot it was there.
I thought it should be very dark and with patches of light. Never thought I'd like him to live in sort of perpetual kind of 24-hour light, you know, that he should sort of make a day and a night for himself, and I would do that through the lighting.
He has this eclectic mix of fantastic art that, you know, he's taken and is caretaking, as he says, in his sort of labyrinth of galleries, and we've had to get everything from, you know, Picasso's to Turner's to modern art, comics, toys, all sorts of things, all sorts of really interesting and sort of, you know, great paraphernalia of stuff.
That room is filled with books that were banned by the government, which is hilarious because I don't know where they got the books from, but a lot of them are like, you know, like Jackie Collins or like Posh Spice Tell-All or whatever. So they're not exactly books you'd consider the government opposing so much.
James described it that, you know, V would collect some books and he would put them in this room, and then he'd collect a few more and put them in and put them in and keep putting them in and keep putting them in. And so at the far end, it's almost like a snowdrift of books that come up. The hardest thing really is the sort of logistics of then shooting something like that. So you can't just all pile books up, because James will say, right, well, let's have that wall taken away. So it would take too long then to take the wall away and then take all the books away piece by piece. So many of them are stuck and screwed together, so they're almost like building blocks.
I suspect there are a number of people in this world of V for Vendetta who are like him, who have their own hoards, their own treasure troves, and the Shadow Gallery is very much a treasure trove.
James brought in a cutout from the newspaper of an old library they had found in Iraq. It looked exactly like the set, just, you know, piles and piles and piles of books that the government had like shut down this library, and it was just sort of incredible having real life parallel.
Voila!
The extravagant outfit that he sports is a Guy Fawkes outfit. Guy Fawkes was a character who was caught underneath Parliament in 1604 trying to blow up Parliament.
V was based in the 16th century but made modern or futuristic in a kind of historical way. So he kept in mind all the kind of stuff that was around at the time of Guy Fawkes and then just chiseled it all down to being quite simple. I'm quite obsessive about the way doublets look, which is made of a kind of basket weave silk, which is an original 16th century weave. And I didn't want there to be all this kind of stuffiness about it, but also I wanted it to be very clean, and we had a lot of problems making his body look very neat, because you always get this wrinkle, and James wanted a very kind of neat, clean, beautiful, sexy look. So that, making a doublet do all the things we wanted to was quite difficult.
His mask is a cross between how Guy Fawkes was and a Harlequin mask. It's part of his, you know, actorly vaudevillian behaviour to wear this mask, you know, which hides how horribly disfigured he is underneath.
It's very interesting when every time the mask is drawn in the comic book, it's a drawing, it's slightly different. It can take on different moods very easily. And we went through a number of, probably 6 or 7 generations of carving the mask. We have a very fine sculptor here at Babelsberg called Burnt, who did a lot of work on that. And it's carved in clay to start with to get the personality, then it's cast in fiberglass, and then it's painted.
I thought if the mask was good enough and you thought about how the voice would come out and how you lit the mask, that you would be able to humanise the mask. You could almost look through the mask and see the person in there.
For me, it's been a matter of trying to animate the mask, make the mask work, make the character work through the mask. And so it's a matter of working with James and working with the DP and trying to make the mask work.
What he's been able to do is, you know, make peace with the mask, because it, you know, can be very sort of claustrophobic.
It's got very narrow field of vision. You can't see beyond a point there, and you can't see below here, and you cannot see above there. So you're really looking here, and the costume has a very high neck, and that restricts your head movement. And so there are all sorts of elements with the hat and the wig that I really couldn't get used to until I got onto set. So I just trusted that things would happen.
Exterior sets. Now that's quite interesting because in our world, we're almost de-dressing. We're taking colour away. I think we're going to get rid of sort of some of the big, more sort of corporate advertising. You know, make it more state-run.
This is a model of Trafalgar Square. It was made to sort of plan and coordinate and show the London authorities what we were going to shoot, where we're going to put our lights and stage the action. It's one of the busiest and most well-known and loved landmarks in London.
Every department had to say exactly what they needed by the 30th of March. How many Klieg lights, how many barriers, how the soldiers were being dressed, what weapons they were carrying.
We're standing in Whitehall. The government has blockaded the street, put shutters on the windows, protecting it from a possible attack on the actual Parliament and on Whitehall itself. So there are some armoured personnel vehicles, some jeeps and trucks that have brought people on. Relax, looking ahead.
Shooting anywhere in London, particularly around government buildings, is a very tricky and political event. It involved perhaps 30 different organisations and government bodies, and of course we have to understand and respect that it's a very sensitive area, security-wise and politically.
Really the thing is that the movements in every area need to be known by everybody so that they can be foretold to the people doing the day-by-day security here.
We've managed to sort of pull off quite a coup really to get permission to shoot what we need to shoot and to close down Trafalgar Square Parliament Square and Whitehall for 3 consecutive nights. It's probably taken five months to set these 3 nights of filming up.
The big sort of visual effects challenges here are blowing things up, which I have to say is a lot of fun. So, and we're, rather than building things on a huge scale, we build what we call miniatures, even though they're still quite large, and blow those up instead. It means you can control the lighting of them and the staging of the pyrotechnics and everything in a studio, and we build them to a scale that is workable but also large enough that looks realistic.
I've always been of the opinion that if the budget can afford it, you should always do things as big as the budget will allow for a start. The old Bailey we're building at 7th scale, so that equates to about a 20-foot high model. We also have a 42-foot run of the side elevation of Parliament, which is the miniature you see behind me.
Big Ben is a very, very big piece. It's about 30 feet high. There's an awful lot of weight.
The difference on this is that we're not just interested in what it looks like externally. We also have to take into account the actual construction internally as well, because they're not being built to last, they're being built to break up. Most of it is built-in plaster. Plaster breaks up well and behaves more like stone.
One would normally build a model, much stronger carcass behind the model. You would build it in timber, you would clad it in whatever material would be best suited for the job. It would be painted and it would be designed for close scrutiny and it would be fairly straightforward.
The other thing is that with pyrotechnics, we're shooting at very high frame rates and we need good depth of field. So the bigger we make the models, the more distance we can get between the camera and the model. A lot of the explosives we're using react very quickly as well, so things are moving through frame very fast. So you need to give yourself a bit of room to be able to capture all that.
I'm finished. I'm glad of it.
Don't say that.
I told you only truth.
I guess in some ways, I've known Alan for such a long time, we do have like a shorthand in some ways, And so it was a very easy kind of process.
Been very busy. Everybody's given 110% in all departments. It's not just set dressing or design or art direction, costume. Everybody's in the same boat.
There are a lot of places, a lot of characters, a lot of things that need to happen to, drive the narrative along. And, there are a lot of sets, and we've just had to get through it.
Even though it is set slightly in the future, I think that, things probably won't have changed that much, and I'm excited to sort of bring that to the screen and see how, if you are complacent or if society becomes complacent, where things can lead.